Hey folks, welcome back to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. It is Tuesday, April 21st, and I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. As usual, folks, follow him along at Twitter at TJAnderson1. Wow, Tim, I have been gnawing and scratching to get into Minnesota, and today is the day. I hope a bunch of people join me because I think they're going to be stoked to find out some stuff in Minnesota that they may not have known before, for sure. So, yeah, as people know, if you follow me, I have 4 years been arguing that Minnesota is a riper target for Republicans as long as it's the right Republican. And Donald Trump is the right Republican. And we're going to get into, and I'll give you guys the backstory about 2016 and everything, about why Trump went there, how he ended up there, and he barely played for it. Nearly won. So I'm stoked to get into that. We got a lot going on in the world today, a lot going on in politics today, a lot going on in the markets today. Let's jump into the markets, Tim. Now that I can see people are, funneling in, let's jump into the markets and see what's going on. And then when we come back, we'll talk about the deal that looks like that's been struck, Tim, because that's a good, right into the economy. Right. And then we'll get into some of the headlines of politics, and then we will get into Minnesota. All right. What's going on out there?
Well, I guess we have to start with oil. I mean, all the real action happened after we went off the air yesterday, Rich, where oil started declining. It was up about $10 or $11. It started getting down towards zero. The market started selling off in response to that. Chatter started to go around that oil was probably going to go negative. And it didn't just go negative by a few cents or $1 or $2. It went negative by $35. Because keep in mind that a futures contract is an obligation to take physical delivery. A futures contract, if you own a futures contract at expiration, it is an obligation to take physical delivery of what that futures contract represents. Oil, a barrel of oil is a little bit more technical definition than just that. And whereas an option contract, if you own a call option to buy IBM at 100 and it closes at 100, that is your option to exercise your right to buy IBM at that stock price.
You're in the money, baby.
Futures contract is an obligation to buy what the definition of the underlying contract is, or as they say, take physical delivery. So many people asked me by text message late yesterday afternoon when we were going back and forth on all this, well, where exactly do you have to take physical delivery? Well, basically, the contract defaults to taking physical delivery in Cushing, Oklahoma, which is kind of where Cushing is like the mecca of the supply, where supply and demand meets in the oil business. That's where all the oil kind of goes from coming out of the ground to then going either to ports in the Gulf or tankers or oil truck, big trucks that have like oil tanks on them, et cetera, et cetera. But there are.
He glitched. All right. So where he was going with this, and he'll be back. This happens with him. The tri-state area with the internet's killing people over there. But what he was basically saying was it was storage and transport issues, and you couldn't give it away. You glitched. You want to finish your thought?
Rich, I lost that signal for a minute. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was trying to fill people in, but go ahead.
You can make arrangements to take physical delivery from oil either in Houston or actually in Bayonne, New Jersey, which has the a deep enough port to get the big oil tankers in and out, and that services the East Coast. Anybody that's ever driven up and down the New Jersey Turnpike sees the giant oil storage facilities right there, just south of Elizabeth, New Jersey. So, look, markets started to sell off. It was just a terrible optic to have oil in negative territory, even though a lot of it was technical. And when I say that, it means that the reason that oil, the May contract is expiring today at 2:30. So basically, the issue is nobody wanted to own that contract because there was no storage facilities available pretty much anywhere on the planet, specifically in the Cushing area or in Houston, or where you would end up having to take delivery of that oil if you own the contract later today. Now, there are some other little quirks going on where the USO ETF, which is a U.S. domestic oil ETF, which is based off the commodity, not based off different stocks. Typically, they always roll the contracts that they have a week to 10 days before expiration into the next month. Some people seem to think they might not have rolled this month, as they might have still been long some contracts. I heard a report early this morning from a very good oil industry expert out of Cushing that coming into yesterday, there were 110,000 futures contracts still long out there in the market. And those were clearly for sale. And the reason they traded in negative price is because it would cost you more to store the oil, if you could even find a place to store it, than it would to just lose $20 by having somebody take the contract off your hands. So the June futures contract, which is the next month, actually it's the front month today, which means it's the most actively traded month today, even though the May contract doesn't expire till 2:30 this afternoon. The June contract is the front month today. That price is bouncing around between $14.50 and $16 today. So we can see that. Now, if we don't resolve the massive oversupply issue in the next month, we may have a similar dynamic for 4.5 weeks from now when the June contract comes close to expiration.
Yeah. So, Tim, basically, I couldn't give it away. And, they couldn't give it away.
Right.
But so what does that mean? So this morning, what do we got happening?
Well, so for the markets yesterday, markets were having a great day yesterday when we were on.
Yeah.
The NASDAQ was pretty much flat. The S&P was down just a little bit. The Dow was down 1%. Markets then turned. It did not like the optic of oil trading in negative territory. It's just sparks talk of economic depression, unprecedented event, et cetera, and stocks started to turn more and more negative. They got closed pretty much near their lows of the day after a very strong day on Friday. The Dow and the S&P probably wiped out close to 80 or 90% of what it gained on Friday.
Yeah.
The NASDAQ a little bit less than that. If you take the 2 days combined, where the Dow was up 3% on Friday, it was down 2.4% yesterday. The S&P was up 2.6% on Friday. It was down 1.8% yesterday. NASDAQ was up 1.5% Friday. It was down 1% yesterday. On Friday, the advanced declines were better than 5-1 positive. Yesterday, they were about 3.5-1 negative.
But we're back to the drawing board now.
All that being said today is that investors are still a little bit rattled over all this. Equity markets are on the decline, starting the day in negative territory. We do have kind of IBM is leading the way down for the Dow Jones Industrial Stocks. It had a little bit of a revenue shortfall. Really not that bad of a revenue shortfall considering, but it was a revenue shortfall notwithstanding, and the stock is down about 5%. That's about 7 or 8 points. So that's worth close to 75 points on the Dow, and we're down maybe 2% on the major averages. It's very early in the day. we just have to see is once we get closer to this, not focusing on the May oil contract anymore, maybe we get a little better feeling about the future later in the day.
So yeah, that brings us into this story, right? So as Tim and I have said, this is about demand with oil. Without demand, we're going to struggle like this. Yesterday was unprecedented, like Tim said. I mean well, folks, we have never seen that. Rewind 3 months, we would not have believed in a million years we would have saw WTI do this like reverse backflip to like. Forget about the stick. You slipped and broke your neck. That's the way it was going yesterday. And then so today we have what appears to be a deal, Tim, from both sides have an agreement now to re-up the PPP program, which we've spoken about, Paycheck Protection Program. So ran out of money. McConnell and the Republicans did try to refund it to the tune of about $250 billion. Democrats held it up. They wanted some money for states. They wanted some money for hospitals. And it looks like today that Republicans are going to give them their money to get this done. So in the end, the idea, and we went over this story yesterday from the NFIB, from other lenders, the former head of the SBA under Barack Obama, the concern was time. So in the end, we just wasted this time anyway, and Republicans are going to give them what they want. So this is the thing with Tim, like you said yesterday, Democrats have them conditioned. So if you're not going to stick to your guns, it's just politically and economically stupid to do what the Republicans continue to do, which is like go through these motions. If you're going to cave anyway, Nancy Pelosi or Schumer come at you with, I want $150 billion for hospitals, then you just come back and say, let's just cut the crap 75. Or whatever it ends up being, Well,
I actually think they wanted a lot more than just 75 or 100 or 150 billion for hospitals. I don't think the money for hospitals was ever a game breaker. I think that there were a lot of other wish list things that Pelosi and Schumer would have ideally wanted that the Republicans just shut the door on right away.
Yeah, and in the end, how much will this matter? Like Tim said, when we turn the corner on the story of oil trading backwards, trading in negative. When we turn the corner on this story, will it be this story about re-upping the PPP? I don't know, because in the end, it certainly helped take away some of that attention, but in the end, as we pressed yesterday, and if you didn't watch the show yesterday, you should go back and listen to the first half hour of the show where Tim and I really hammered on this oil issue. Tim, we were Inside the Numbers was talking about WTI well before it started trending on Twitter and the New York Times and everybody else picked it up. We saw this coming. And your segment yesterday, if people haven't watched that show from yesterday, go back and look at the market updates, the first two specifically from yesterday's show. And you would have saw this coming. It's about demand. And the best thing, I think, whatever, get the money out there at this point. They're bleeding, they're burning the printer press anyway, so get the money out there. But in the end, this is really about demand. We're coming up on the summer driving season. For those who don't realize or know, during the summertime, we're turning that month now. This is traditionally when oil prices begin to rise. Demand starts to kick into gear. People are getting in their cars and Tim, and they're headed to the beach. They're headed on vacation. They're going to, the Hattis, or they're going to Myrtle Beach, wherever it is that they may be, and Disney, down here, and they're going. But this is the issue with, this not available to them, and these economies being constricted, being squeezed. There's no demand. And I made a joke yesterday about my car was still half full. My Jeep was still half full on Saturday. That's going to happen again this week. And until that ends, then we're going to be here looking at these flip-flop, these incredible moves that we just haven't seen historically. So I'm not sure, Schumer, they haven't given full details yet. I'm just telling people what I heard. There's hospital money There's money for the states. Like Tim and I said yesterday, the hospital money was never really a hot button issue. I think it was just a matter of money. They opened up with 150, and Republicans actually, their opening position was, you haven't even spent the money you got last time, which is what I talked about on the show yesterday. But in the end, they're going to do it. And if you talk to the NFIB and the rest of them, and if you didn't read that article on People's Pundit Daily yesterday, go do it. I mean, the NFIB represents American small business. All right. And they really wanted to see some stuff earmarked. If they spent this time, my understanding is, Tim, there is an earmark provision in this. I don't know that to be sure.
There's a quirky provision in it where a certain amount of money has to go toward very, very, very small community businesses.
Yeah.
Maybe a few nonprofits. I'm not really up on all the details of it yet, but I think basically that was a very bipartisan agreement. There were a couple glitches in the first $350 billion tranche of this PPP program. There were some very large companies that are actually publicly traded companies and or very large chain restaurants. Danny Meyer's Shake Shack got a lot of first negative, then positive publicity, where he actually got a $10 million loan from this. He technically qualified because he has fewer than 500 employees. It's very possible that a lot of those, some of those might be independently owned by other people. I'm not sure. I don't know how many total franchises or branch outlets he has. But basically what he did was, after he got that financing secured, he ended up getting money from, he ended up confirming that he could get a bank loan from his bank, independent of that program. And he's a guy that's obviously a very, very, very successful restaurateur, initially in the New York City area, and now is Shake Shack. And so what he did was, because he's very, very sensitive to his public image and to the idea that he's doing the right thing for people. So what he did was he kicked that $10 million back so that can go to other people that maybe got shut out of that. Maybe some businesses that only need a million or 800,000 or even less than that to keep their 6 or 8 person restaurant or deli or diner or any other type of business still going.
And
another example that we haven't heard the other side of yet, and I'm not absolutely sure if it's publicly owned or not. If it is, it's part of a larger network, was Ruth Chris. Ruth Chris Steakhouse Restaurants got 20 million. Now the max was 10 million, but allegedly they got 20 million because within the Ruth Chris franchise, there are technically 2 different entities. Each got 10 million.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I
wouldn't be surprised to see at least half of that get kicked back into the pot. Otherwise, I just think the blowback on their operation will be very negative. I don't think they want the negative publicity.
Yeah, there's only so much there could be a few other
instances.
I mean, there's only, they don't want to have that hanging around their neck, So I mean, so there's a lot of misinformation about this program, but in this one as well, because the time issue, the time consideration was their top consideration. So since we've hung around and waited, it's also bipartisan, or at least, maybe not fully on the Republican side, but there are a lot of Republican senators who were okay with the CDFI provision, Tim, and that would help.
That's the provision that I was trying to talk about.
Yeah, that would help some of this. They're community development financial institutions. So what Tim is saying is they're just, tighter relationships, and they'll be more likely to allocate these funds to these, make sure that, what you and what the viewers may view to be a traditional small business gets this money, or gets their share of this money. Because as we talked about before, the SBA loans, the SBA's definition of a small business is not what many people might consider a small business. So the National Federation of Independent Businesses, the CDFIs, they really wanted to see, and the NFIB released their own plan. I put it up the other day. It was interesting. They wanted to see at least 200 billion of the 400 billion that they requested and proposed. So that's half. They wanted half to go to traditional small business, 20 employees or less. So what most people would consider a small business. And that didn't happen the first time around to the extent that they would like to see. And they did a survey, really interesting. While, the vast majority found this program easy, Tim, the smaller guys did have trouble, more trouble than the other ones did, which, I mean, I don't, like I said, Tim, the other day, this was a big program. And I think that they administered this about as good as any government program could be administered. Yes, there were some hiccups. No, what you reference as hiccups or whatever, before we spoke to Treasury that Friday, they said this stuff will be fixed, predominantly about the community banks. Right. Come Monday, the community banks, that issue was not only fixed, they began to be the predominant application process. I mean, that's from, now we have SBA data on it. They've released it. It's not even close. It's not even close. The bigger banks don't represent I'm sorry about the actual total number of applications. So, it'll be interesting to see that, Tim. Again, time was number one. Even Obama's former small business administration chief, she said, I get the provision. I support it. But what is the most important concern now is speed, is time. And since they had this time to negotiate anyway, when we get the details of this bill, there's almost no excuse. And I want to make clear, I do hear that these provisions are in this bill. So at this point, Marco Rubio, I spoke a little bit about this before. Marco Rubio did make a good point, at least back when it failed. I don't know if that point holds anymore because we've been, now a week later. He made the point that if we did earmark some of this for smaller businesses, the 20 employee or less provision, then it would just take too long to administer. And it was a very strong argument discussing, what is the capacity of the Small Business Administration? They're already running at like 500% of capacity. So that argument actually made sense to me, even though I absolutely would support that provision if I was a lawmaker. Right. But it did make sense. But now here we are, Tim, right? So is there really an argument anymore not to include that provision? I mean, there's going to be some that make it, but is there really one to make it? And we're already here.
The only argument not to include it would have been if it would create a big delay in rolling it out, which again, this is not the initial part of the program. This is really just a 2-line bill that adds $250 billion, probably more than that now, probably closer to 450, because they added in some, money for the hospitals and money for that other provision you mentioned. So it adds 450 billion to the PPP program, or maybe it adds 250 to the PPP program and then adds a couple of other offshoot financing tentacles from that also. It's not a 50 to 60 to 400 page bill.
Yeah, and the politics of this, if this turns out that let's say this money took too long to get there, for the remaining companies that didn't get it, let's just play hypothetical here. Okay. Democrats could really find themselves in a world of problem over actually, Tim, even if it gets there in time, Democrats can find themselves in some trouble for pulling the games that they pulled. All right. Now, if you're a lobbyist, if you're coming at this from the NFIB, right? If you're Brad, the head of the NFIB, you don't want to take anybody off because you don't want to be partisan. You want, Congress changes power. So you don't want to just be a lobbyist if you're in the business, a sector and not a issue advocacy group on K Street. If you are an advocate for business, You don't want to be just a, Republican lobbyist or a Democrat. You want as broad of a coalition as possible. So I just want to read this comment. This is the comment we had gotten from him. All right. And listen to how he words it, because you know who he's talking about, but he doesn't want to single anybody out. Right. And he says, small businesses, which account for half of the American economy and nearly half of all jobs, are fighting for their survival every day that this crisis continues. This is Brad Close of the NFIB, he's the president. Efforts by the administration and Congress, while well-intentioned, have been met with significant challenges to this point. What he's talking about is not the rollout of the plan. He's talking about Democrats holding it up for laundry list issues. And then even Karen Mills, again, that is Obama's former head of the SBA. She flatly said, what I'm saying is, number one, get the money replenished. And Congress has to act as soon as possible. But if you're Brad, you're doing a tightrope dance, aren't you? Right? Because you don't want to put anybody on the spot and make anybody look bad, Tim. That doesn't serve who you're representing, right? That doesn't serve who you're advocating for. But we all do know who he's talking about. And Democrats put themselves in a really vulnerable position. And I mean, they better hope and pray this thing works out, because Republicans could, put this around their neck. They can hang this right around their neck. We'll have to see, but they can hang it around their neck. Come November, if somebody had lost their job because their company, their owner, their boss did not get this money on time, they can directly blame that on the Democrats. I mean, this is not a bipartisan screw up at all. Republicans were ready to pull the trigger on this. If they would have just kept replenishing it anyway, Tim, then those companies would have had it, because there's a lot of, again, misinformation on this bill. There are caps. And unless you're playing games like Tim was saying, well, so these are technically different entities in the same franchise, that's not going to be widespread. That's just not. And
no, it's not.
Yeah, and there's going to be enough. If Republicans just kept throwing 250 at it, there was going to be enough to get around. So there really is no way that Democrats can dodge taking full responsibility for anything that may have gone wrong. And come November, again, there's going to be a lot of voters, Tim, who if that's the way it goes, there's going to be a lot of voters that are mad at at whoever. They're going to think Congress in their mind. So it's going to be a Republican's job to make that case. But it's an easy case to make, is my point.
Right.
Very easy case to make. I mean, they can't dodge it. The first time around, the PPP was part of the CARES Act. And the first time around, they held that up for the first round, the Green New Deal. I mean, for those
a week to 10 days.
Yeah, a week to 10 days.
At least, a little bit more than that.
Yep. When the negotiations had to basically get restarted that Thursday, they had made real progress. And then over the weekend, essentially a deal was made. It really wasn't until Nancy Pelosi rolled back in town that collapsed. And then, 7 to 10 days, held that up. And then when the Republicans were ready to jump on this, the day before they were ready to vote to replenish this thing, the day before funding ran out, and they tried parliamentary, guard measures, tricks, gimmicks to hold it up. So this part is on them. There'll be plenty of blame to go around for testing, which is their, that's not, so that's going to be their number one clarion call. But the reason why people will be out of jobs is if that happens, I'm saying, is because Democrats held this thing up, and for for their own laundry list, which I cannot see the American public taking this well, is my point. There are just too many people, Tim, that aren't particularly partisan or ideological. And while they're a small number of the overall electorate, they represent a lot of people. And they're not going to care about, whether Nancy Pelosi could get this provision of the Green New Deal or the National Endowment, for this and that. They're not going to want to hear that crap. That when it comes, they're not really paying attention to the specifics now. But come election, if Republicans can make that case, it could be a really powerful, potentially devastating case to make against Democrats. Really could. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, really? I mean,
I agree. Now, look, we're just in the first inning of this, really. Yeah. So we have to see, how many, what some of these companies are like coming out of this. And look, a lot of people across the country will notice 2 months from now as they're driving down the street, oh, look, that business didn't come back, or this florist is still shut down, or, this restaurant hasn't reopened yet. So it will be very noticeable in everybody's, individual, town, city, local community, what the impact of all this was.
And, just looking from a comment, it's not a hard one to argue. And I said it's not an easy case to make. And that's always true. That's a good observation. It's not an easy case to make if it takes you 15 minutes to explain. It took us 15 minutes to get into the details of it, but it can take a Republican message all of 15 seconds.
Right.
Democrats held up your assistance. They held it hostage, and you lost your job. Right. Simple. That's it. That's all. I mean, it's an easy case to make. If you were to give me probably 15 minutes, in my thoughts, I could probably come up with a cute little bumper sticker and everything. I mean, a nice little slogan, throw in a little bit of use of alliteration, make it real snappy, piss a lot of people off. I mean, that's it. It would not be hard. Oh man, it's 10:31 already. Let's do our spiel here. All right, guys, this is a show I've been waiting for since we started this. It is Tuesday, April 21st. You are watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You guys can follow me at Twitter right there at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson, Wall Street's own. You follow him along on Twitter, guys. I'm telling you, if you missed this thing with the oil yesterday, they were hours behind him, and you would have saw this comment. At TJ Anderson 1 on Twitter. Follow him along. He gives great market notes in the morning. And if you follow me, then you see me retweet them at TJ Anderson 1. If you guys are watching on Periscope, give us those hearts. Follow the account that you're watching it stream on. Follow both. It streams on mine, streams on People's Pundit Daily as well. Facebook Live, folks, if you haven't liked the page yet, like the page so you can get notified when we go live. The same thing for YouTube subscribers. It will notify you right when we go live, which is every day, 10 a.m. Eastern to noon. And of course, by the way, those Facebook, YouTube guys, you're doing a great job. We're on a roll. Let's keep it up. Share the page with your friends and family. Tell them to like it too. If you want to support the show, the ultimate way to do that is to subscribe to PPD, which is ppdnews.us/subscribe. Or you could go to People's Pundit Daily and find it. That is how we make the magic over here. ppdnews.us/subscribe. All right, Tim, it is, that was a very fast half hour. That blew right by. We're going to have a market update right now. Then we're going to run through a couple headlines that are on PPD right now that I think are important we should talk about. And there's some polling on one of the headlines that I want to get into because verified Twitter, the media, they are way in left field on this issue. Like, this is one of these, we're going to talk about this headline. This is one of these issues where they are completely in left field. They are completely out of touch with the rest of the American public. So let's let Tim tell us where we're at, how the last 35 or so minutes of trading went. And when we come back, we'll hit the headlines. And then in the next hour, we're going to do Minnesota, which I'm stoked about. What's going on out there, Tim?
So I'll do the markets real quick. The Dow, S&P, NASDAQ all down between 1.5% and 1.75%, bouncing around a little bit. The Dow's down about 400 points. And the one thing that I do like in the market that I thought was a little bit of a positive underneath the headlines yesterday, the Russell 2000 had gained 4.3% on Friday. It was only down 1.5% yet on yesterday, whereas the Dow and the S&P and NASDAQ gave up most of their gains from Friday. The Russell has clearly lagged significantly on the bounce off the March lows. It really speaks to the middle America economy. of the smaller companies. It's the second 2,000 stocks on a market capitalization basis in the Russell 2000. So it really talks to those smaller cap stocks. The one thing that I don't like going on is that bond yields continue to decline. So on the 10-year yields just over 0.5%. The 30-year bond yields just over 1%. I would really like to see that 10-year yield get up closer to 1%. The extreme low when we had a day of really excessive panic in the market. I believe it was the first day after the oil price war shock between Saudi Arabia and Russia, when oil dropped 30% in one day.
Right.
The low on the 10-year yield was 0.4%. This morning it's at 0.52%. I don't like seeing it that low. I just think it's unhealthy for that to be less than, at least right now, really 0.8, 0.9%. And I'd like to see the 30-year up closer to 1.5%. It's at 1.15%. We really need to get the economy kicked back into gear for that to happen.
Yeah, and Trump talked about that at the press conference a little bit yesterday. He brought somebody had brought it up, and maybe it was the guy from Reuters, same one who asked him about oil, which he had to pull the thing again yesterday. This guy's crazy. I mean, man, you don't want the Saudis. Let me just address this. You do not want the Saudis and the Russians to crank out more oil right now. What are you talking about? And learn how, just Google supply and demand, for crying out loud. I mean, Trump's funny with him, and he's really actually gracious with how he handles the guy's ignorance. Right. He's incredibly ignorant. That's not how supply and demand works. You don't want them to do that. If anything, you want to pick up the phone and tell Vladimir Putin and your buddy, the Saudi prince, to cut production right now. Anyway, but he just continues to do that. But Trump said, he was talking about the yield, and for those who don't know, that is indicative, of course, of bad news. And Trump is he's doing what he can. I mean, he's the president's ultimate job, and Trump is very good at this, is being a cheerleader for the country. So he's trying to spin this in a good way and say that this is a great time to borrow. It would be a great time to do infrastructure, or he'll point something else out, because you want to borrow when it's low. You want to buy a ton of oil while it's low, buy low, sell high. That's his job, to put a positive spin on this. Presidents are not supposed to go out there and say it's a catastrophe. I mean, that would be an epic failure of a president. But he's trying to put a spin on it. But I'm with Tim 100% on this. But we're not going to see that go up, Tim, until there is actual activity again.
Right.
We're just not. You can't. This is some of the problem, and I even see conservative lawmakers on Twitter. They'll make a comment about oil, or they'll make a comment about the Treasury yield, and that's why Congress has to act and do this. Congress cannot do anything about this stuff after a while. This is my point. They can only provide a lifeline for a short-term action to get us back up and rolling. They are not going to be able to go back to their printing press and fix this problem. You can't do that. You have to get out of the way. I do just want to answer somebody's question, because I'm going to forget. I didn't see the new Firehouse Optimist polls. I don't know where they're going with this. I will tell you, that they are new. Optimist is not new, and they are the polling firm that conducts the polling for Firehouse Strategies, which is a political consultant firm that is run by Alex Conant. You may remember him, and others. He's got partners. You may remember him as Marco Rubio's campaign manager. Nice guy. I have, and the question is about their polling and the credibility of their polling. I have heard from a lot of people who will ask me questions, Tim, and email and text me and say, what is the deal with some of these numbers? If you looked at the internals, they look a little screwy. They do something, and I know where they're getting some of this from. There's high crossover. You'll see Trump is winning 28% of the Democratic vote or something like that in Pennsylvania. That is in the end, some of these things just tend to work out. All right. obviously internally, it will not shake out like that. But what they're doing and where they're getting that from, I can almost guarantee it. If they were to split up the data collection method, say these are the responses that we gathered by sending people an SMS text message, and this is the responses we got from landlines. I am willing to bet that if they were to split those up, we would see that the higher crossover comes from their landline calls, Tim, and their text message, prompted surveys, because we have seen that as well. That happens. It looks like a bit of a weighting issue, maybe with region. Trump would not win Wisconsin by 9 points, if you remember those polls that they did. But in the end, a lot of this stuff tends to work out, which brings us back, though, to Donald Trump, which I want to get two headlines in before we get to our next segment. All right. And Trump is announced on Twitter yesterday that he's going to suspend immigration to the U.S. During the coronavirus crisis. All right, temporarily. And Verified Twitter went off on a tangent yesterday, Tim. You saw Nate Cohen's tweet, which I actually responded to, because he says, all these doctors come from, foreign born. That would only, of course, be an issue if he was throwing the doctors out who came here already. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It was ridiculous. Unless you expect this crisis to last for years, a temporary suspension of immigration, like the Surgeon General Dr. Adams, he was actually on an interview down here this morning where I am, and he basically put it best. I'm not sure what's new here, except that it's expanded a little bit, and that there'll be a halt for those who follow this stuff. Wolf, the head of HHS, had basically approved tens of thousands of more visas that are required by law. That is what that would impact. But for right now, so let me just get to what Trump said, and then I'll comment more on it. But he said, in light of the attack from the invisible enemy, as well as the need to protect the jobs of our great American citizens, I will be signing an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration to the United States. All right. And they flipped out. That move obviously does go further, Tim, than China and Europe, but Adams is largely right? All we're doing is putting a temporary halt on the rest. So who is going through the pipeline, diversity visas, H-1B visas, that kind of stuff. And again, the key word here is temporarily. They're going nuts, Tim, but we have polling across the spectrum from Rasmussen reports, which is, considered the Trump friendly, if they're Trump friendly, then what does that make everybody else, right? Democrat friendly, obviously. But we have polling from them, the Harris poll, Harvard Harris. We have polling from Ipsos. The president has overwhelming support on this issue. It is overwhelming. Rasmussen survey was conducted from the 15th to the 16th, and it had 8 in 10 Americans agreed with the decision that Trump made earlier in the month to impose travel bans. And Trump did the travel ban on China before, and then he imposed another one on Europe. 80% of Americans agreed and supported that decision across the board. Politically, racial identification, 91% of Republicans, 78% of Democrats, 73% of unaffiliated voters. All of the groups, at least, while there was some separation, obviously Republicans are more likely to support it than Democrats, but still, Tim, we rarely see all three groups in at least 3/4 agreement. That is very rare. And then you can't just dismiss it like big media loves to do with Rasmussen, because we have other polling that goes even further and similar huge margins. Ipsos poll conducted from March 10th to 11th. They similarly found 8 in 10 Americans support pausing immigration amid the crisis and rising unemployment. It was 79%.
The reality is it's already been stalled because we're not processing visas. We're not,
What are they flipping out about? Nate Cohen's like, that's just one of the many, when he cites how many doctors are foreign born. That's just one of the many problems with this order. Wake up, man. You live in New York, in a bubble in New York City. You really know nothing else that's going on outside that area. Of course, the rest of the country is going to view this as common sense, and it's not much different at all. Like you just said, Tim, it's not much different at all. And Adam said that this morning. What is different here? And then, by the way, he went on to say that this does have benefits. I'm talking about healthcare from a healthcare policy standpoint. During this crisis, there are benefits to this. So, and again, so he's got the support of his own healthcare advisors, and he's got the public health advisors, and he's got the support of the American public. I mean, 79% of Americans said they wanted immigration to the U.S. temporarily suspended. That is the Ipsos poll, is the closest thing that we have to what he's talking about, the full length, the full measure. And then 70% of Americans said they supported halting all international traffic to major U.S. cities. And they cited a few: New York, New York City, Detroit, New Orleans. And then the Harvard Harris poll, which is the third one that we found put up with this article, because it's always important to remember, where the public stands on this. This is the most recent one, March 24th to March 26th. 83%, so roughly 5 in 6, said they favor ending all immigration from Mexico at this time. And that's up from 76% who said so earlier in the month of March. And the support for ending immigration from Mexico by race, Tim, get this, by race, 75% of Hispanics, 77% of African Americans, and then overall by parties, 73% of Democrats, 84% of independents, and 93% of Republicans. Talk about media just being all alone in left field.
Right.
I mean, you are all alone out there, folks. You are a tiny sliver, a tiny minority, and then they go out and you have people like, I don't even remember, Joy Reid, go out there and, God, I didn't watch her show today, but given what she said yesterday, they're going to try to tie this to race. I mean, it's 3/4 more than 3/4, 75 to 77 for African Americans. They don't agree with you.
Right.
They don't agree with you. Where are you coming up with this? Where are they getting their opposition from? I mean, if you go on Twitter, it's like an alternate reality, man. It's like one of those issues. It's crazy. It reminds me kind of abortion, Tim. Like the most opposed group to abortion restrictions in this country are liberal men. I'm serious. I mean, that has been consistent for years. If you ask, suburban women, let's talk about the suburban women that we're always talking about, right? Trump has lost. They don't agree with late-term abortion. Right. Even moderates, they don't. And we actually, I'll ask permission to be able to talk about this. We were hired by somebody to run a deep dive on abortion, and we actually define things like beyond what media polls will do. They never really explain what is involved when you're talking about late-term abortion. Women are horrified when they hear this stuff, horrified. I mean, what you think they're ever going to pull their heads, out of it? It's amazing. The polls only matter to them when they help them. And I know that's just the way it is with everybody, but these are big numbers, and it's very rare that we see more than 3/4 across party lines agreeing with something, and they have the audacity to oppose it or make it about race or something. If it was about race, Tim, you wouldn't see 75% of Hispanics agreeing. You know what I mean? It's nuts. And by the way, if you go into Asian and other, I believe that was even higher. I think that was closer to African Americans. I'm in front of me, so I'm going to spit out a number, but I want to say that was also around 77%. I mean, it's just a total disconnect, complete disconnect. So I'm looking. I will get to some of your. So it looks like Jeffries, Tim Kaine, and Kamala Harris are calling it xenophobic. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Just a worn out talking point.
It's really getting, if everything is xenophobic, And if 80% of the country agrees, are you really suggesting that 80% of the American public, to include non-white people, they are xenophobic? I mean, this is just, man, they really, like you said, it's worn out. That's a good way to put it. It's really worn out. It really is it's really time to move on. All right, so that's that. I know a lot of Trump supporters were stoked when they saw that, and I got a text message from somebody who works for Trump, and he was a little bit ahead. I didn't see the tweet, and it was like overjoyed. Jubilation was the word. All right. The second story, Tim, I want to get to is what happened yesterday with Katie Tur and the rest of them with the Kim Jong-un story. Okay. And I will tell you what the media reported, and then I will tell you what we heard. Now, if you talk to intelligence officials, they will tell you that it is very difficult to get good information out of North Korea. And that, that especially when it comes to their leadership, they really are closed-lipped, very tight-lipped. So anyway, the headline on PPD is speculation over health of Kim Jong-un mounts after online reports. There is a website, Daily NK. It is run by mostly by defectors. It's based in South Korea, and they reported that this kicked off with them. They reported that Kim Jong-un received a cardiovascular surgery on April 12th, and that it was from, quote, excessive smoking, obesity, and overwork. There actually have been books on this, Tim, from people who've been allowed to. There is a lot of material on his health, his obesity, yes, and his excess. So that's not really surprising. What was surprising is that there are numerous people that have been around for a long time, and speculation should not run amok. They shouldn't feed into it. When it comes to a country like North Korea, it's incredibly difficult to confirm this stuff. So right. U.S. intelligence. All right.
They don't call it the Hermit Kingdom for nothing.
That's right. Good. Yeah, that's exactly right. They reported doctors assessed that Chairman Kim's condition improved, and that most of the medical team returned to Pyongyang on April 19th. A few of them remained in Hyeongsang to oversee his recovery. All right. And they quoted this source. My understanding is that he had been struggling with cardiovascular problems since last August, but it worsened after repeated visits to, I don't even know how to do that one, Mount Paiku, right? And that was, they quoted a source as saying, and that is I don't want to, that's their sacred mountain. So I don't want to dog their sacred mountain or mispronounce it.
Well, that might have been when he was shown riding the white horse up to the sacred mountain. Right. Maybe 6 weweeks ago or so.
But what they were trying to insinuate, if you read it, is that like he was going there maybe to make peace, with himself. Because I mean, it was just, but maybe they're right. Maybe they're right, Tim. We'll see. But CNN then reports that he's in, quote, grave danger after the surgery. All right. And this is where CNN goes wrong. They cited a U.S. official with direct knowledge, and I'm saving.
No U.S. officials have direct knowledge.
I'm saving what we were told for after I read what a couple people have said. All right, because like Tim just said, they don't have direct knowledge. Another U.S. official told CNN that the concerns over Chairman Kim's health are credible, but that it is difficult to assess the severity of his condition. All right. And the links to these reports are in the story on People's Pundit Daily. I'm reading from it now, and I'm summarizing most of it. But we were not able to independently confirm either report, obviously. Okay. But like Tim just said, in truth, what we heard is pretty much in line with that second official quoted by CNN, which that they do believe is that concerns over his health are credible, but that they really don't know. It's just difficult to assess the severity of whatever health problems he may have, because it's like Tim, you really put it best. They don't call it the Hermit Kingdom for nothing. All right. So Katie Tur from NBC News goes on Twitter. I took a snapshot of that. I knew she was going to delete it. I knew it. And I said, nope, I'm going to take a picture of this before she does. Sure enough, she deleted it. She posted a tweet claiming that Chairman Kim was brain dead. All right. And then she goes on and she's like, big scoop. You know, she says, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is brain dead, according to, you ready? 2 U.S. officials. He recently had cardiac surgery and slipped into a coma, according to 1 U.S. current and 1 U.S. former official, Tim. Former. God. I mean, you are unbelievably reckless since there are no current U.S. officials willing to make even remotely close to that claim on the record. No way. No way. She got this from a former Obama administration official. Okay, that's what happened here.
Right.
They were wrong, or at least if they're right, Tim, it's because a broken clock is right twice a day. Because the ones we spoke with, they don't know. End of story. And NBC News confirms, she says, confirms and adds to CNN scoop from me. And then she adds, some colleagues. All right. And she adds her colleagues at CNN and NBC. And then she goes on not long later and says, I've deleted that last tweet out of an abundance of caution. She wrote, waiting on more info. Apologies, folks. Folks, it is okay. Right. Tim's just laughing. It could in fact be true, I guess, right, Tim? I mean, it could be true that former Obama administration official had the story, had heard about it. I mean, but the odds, folks, the odds of them having an in with people close to Kim Jong-un is crazy. It's crazy considering active U.S. intelligence personnel do not know the specific details about his condition. And interestingly, later on, also citing multiple U.S. officials, Jack Posobiec at One America News posted a tweet that he caught the coronavirus. Now, this is interesting because this is more believable, actually, right, Tim? I mean, this is more believable from a Chinese doctor. Now, for people who don't understand, who don't know, North Korea survives because of their support from Beijing. So they lend them a lot of assistance. And the idea that China would send their physicians to help Kim Jong-un is actually, that's believable. That's a believable story. And that he is in stable condition for now. Again, though, the problem is that the specificity of this claim, maybe Jack's got some people who know, more, but everything we've been told, they just don't know. And it's what the headline is right here. This is speculation. Maybe again, if it turns out, Tim, that they're right, then it was a Hail Mary. You know what I mean? It was a Hail Mary because they are very difficult. Shadowy government, folks. It is a shadowy government. They keep all of this very close to the vest. And it's notoriously not just intelligence gathering, but media reporting. I think Reuters did a really good job doing their write-up. I read it this morning. I think they did a really good job on their write-up, and Reuters has a lot of experience in that area of the world. They were very careful. They were very careful with how they worded it. Anyway, Chairman Kim last appeared on North Korean state-run media on April 11th. He presided over the Workers' Party Politburo. So on April 15th, North Korea held a national holiday. It marks the anniversary of the birthday of their founder, Kim Jong-un, which is Kim's grandfather. This is adding to the speculation because he was not in attendance for the ceremony. And moreover, the regime fired multiple short-range missiles during the ceremony. These missile events, these missile tests, displays of power, ceremonial, whatever it may be, they usually are accompanied by his presence. So that is helping to fuel the speculation. And then also history, because in 2008, his father, Kim Jong-il, was absent from North Korea's 60th anniversary. That led to very similar speculation to what we're hearing today. And it was revealed that he had a stroke. His health never recovered. It continued to decline until his death in 2011. So again, as the disclaimer here with that at PPD, I think we did this one justice. Worth noting again, folks, intelligence gathering and media reporting on North Korea are notoriously difficult. The communist government keeps information close to the vest, particularly when dealing with leadership. So a word of caution. What are your thoughts on that, Tim? I'm reading it, so I'm like right up on the screen. I can't wait to get that other camera going. But what are your thoughts on this?
I just think that there's just no way to know unless you hear some comment from Mike Pompeo or some other very high-ranking government official. It's just speculation right now. I mean, I don't think it's speculation that he has health issues. I mean, you take a look at any public appearance he's made in the last 2 years, and a guy at his age should not look like he does and not have the trouble walking in a normal gait like he does.
And reports of wheezing when he met with Trump at the DMV. There were a lot of people said, he was wheezing, getting up over a curb like this high. I mean, he was just having very difficult times. So that's true. But,
I'm sure his personal habits, his diet, and his intake of tobacco, possibly alcohol, is just, never been limited. So, it's just, I don't know what's to gain by speculating on it tremendously.
Right. I don't understand some of what they do sometimes, Tim.
Right.
I really don't. Like Katie Tur, she has been around, whatever you think of Katie Tur, she's been around a long time. That's a really rookie mistake. I mean, it's almost like they don't have a national security division over at NBC News to tell her that you can't trust information like this,
Right.
I don't get it, man. I just don't get it. No, well, but again, the Pasovic, his story, his claim, again, speculation. He's got it from two sources, he says, but I'm just telling you, the people we spoke with just frankly said really what you said, Tim, like his health concerns are real because he had issues. And that anybody who this is how it was explained, anybody who undergoes a surgery like that with his issues and, you would have, there are concerns. It's not like you'd expect him to just jump right off the operating table. He's got too many problems, but the U.S. cannot identify the severity of those conditions. And I mean, that was pretty cut and dry. Interesting. We'll see. Really interesting. So it's 11:02. Let's do the spiel and the market update. And on the other end of it, we're going to get into Minnesota. Finally, I was so pumped this morning. I'm telling you. And now I can already feel it. All right. So it is almost 11:03. If I waited 5 seconds, it would be on Tuesday, April 21st. You are watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. Follow along on Twitter. You can follow me at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow him, folks, on Twitter at TJ Anderson1. At TJ Anderson1. If you guys are on Periscope, keep giving those hearts. All of you, we really got to give you a shout out and thank you for it. It's great. Follow along the account that you are watching it on. And if you're on Facebook Live, if you haven't subscribed to the page yet, make sure you subscribe on Facebook Live. It'll alert you. Like the page, People's Pundit Daily on Facebook, and it will alert you to when we go live every morning, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time. And YouTube watchers, you guys, we're on a roll. Keep subscribing. Share the page with your friends and family. Tell them to give us a subscribe. Thumbs up the videos. All of those metrics matter on YouTube, and we are on a roll and want to keep it up to get to those milestones. So thanks for that. And then, of course, the ultimate way to support the show, how we're able to do this, which we are doing something nobody else is doing. The ultimate way to do that is to subscribe on PPD, which is ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. And again, folks, we are the more we can, we'll just keep beefing this up. The more the more we can, we will bring you more and more cool features and segments. So let's kick it off with the market update, the 11:05 market update with Tim the Source Anderson. Tim, what's going on out there?
So markets are sliding a bit from where they were half an hour and an hour ago. The Dow is down 2.25%. The Nasdaq is down 3.25%. The S&P is down 2.75%. I really think what's going on is the sharp decline we saw in the price of oil yesterday, and even today with the June contract trading in the $15-16 range. I just think a lot of investors are waking up to the fact that we've got a lot of work to do to get the economy back online. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. But markets had rallied 25 to 30% off their March lows, basically in just less than a month. And we've got a lot of work to do for the economy to pick up to the progress that the markets have over the last 4 weeks.
Right. And demand, Tim.
Right.
Demand.
Right. So we've got a little, we've got a little bit of a pullback. We've got a 2-day sell-off here. I don't think it would be unusual at all to see the market maybe retrace 8 to 10% after having rallied 25 to 30%. If it retraces more than that, we just have to see what the underlying headlines are at the time. Clearly, the market is still very headline sensitive, and the oversupply of oil, and basically a function of not just the U.S. economy, but a lot of global economies. Economies all over the world basically are in any stage of slowdown, partial shutdown to a near complete shutdown.
Right.
So, that's just going to take the demand for oil and petroleum products significantly down. And the only way we're going to reverse that is to get cars back on the road, get airplanes back in the air, get increase the truck traffic to servicing more than just grocery stores and home deliveries, and more toward what is some type of a normal economy.
Right. Before we get into Minnesota, don't let me forget about the impact. Somebody had asked yesterday in New Hampshire, and don't let me forget to address the impact of the Access Hollywood tape, because I guess they had read How Trump Won, Larry Schweikert and Joel Pollack, which if you did, then I was interviewed for that book about the polling we did, and that they brought that up specifically. In Minnesota, it's a bigger deal even than it was in New Hampshire. So that was did you quickly tell people where we were with oil before I get into Minnesota real quick, or we're still?
Yeah, actually the May oil contract, which expires at 2:30 this afternoon, has gone slightly positive.
Wow.
But the June contract is still hovering at maybe around the $16 level.
Right.
Look, if we don't start to see a return to normal economic activity in early May, we're going to have the same issue of oversupply with the June contract that we had with the May contract yesterday and overnight.
Okay. All right, let's get into Minnesota, folks. Okay. And crazy world, oil flipping the way it does. We're living in some crazy times. So here is Minnesota. Okay. And it looks like Tim's going to step away. I may be able to make it bigger until Tim pops back. Nope. Okay, here's Minnesota. I will run this analysis in 2 seconds. I just want to give you some quick background. For those of you who may not have been following me for a while and have been new to my Twitter or the show or whatever, the show is new. I have been arguing for many years that Minnesota was a ripe target for the right Republican candidate, and that Republicans, even pre-Trump, had been going after Michigan, states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where usually just a few points away from each other, very similar in demographics, but that Minnesota, without as much attention, without as many resources, spending time, energy, and money, had been closer in a number of cycles on the presidential level, and that Republican candidates have not played for it. We have to give you some background on Minnesota and why I'm talking about that. All right. What I mean by it being right for the right candidate, and that Donald Trump was, in fact, the right candidate. He made one stop in Minnesota. Give a quick background. In September, and then I want to just give you a brief idea of the electorate in Minnesota before we run it. So, because when I run this voter analysis, you guys are going to be shocked. You are going to be stunned, because Democrats can clean Republicans' clocks in this state in any given year. But then out of nowhere, you can have some crazy things happen. In 2018, Minnesota, there were only 2 or 3 seats. Yes, there were 3. While Republicans lost 40 plus seats, they actually offset that with 3 wins. One of them was in Pennsylvania. The other 2 were in Minnesota, districts in Minnesota. Okay. And there was another one that was actually very close and is flippable. All right. So it isn't considered a traditional battleground state, but the shift in the electoral map and the demographics of the state and the underlying philosophy of the state has given it I want to say like a false Democratic lean. All right. The party in Minnesota is not the traditional Democratic Party. It is a state party that is really not part of the DNC. And the reason why it is such is because it is a populist Democratic Party. It is not a corporate Democratic Party. The opportunity here for Trump and Republicans has come from them abandoning that. And I am talking about decades and decades and decades and decades of populism being ingrained in the electorate. And they have abandoned many of those principles for the corporate Democrat media establishment. Hillary Clinton was a perfect example. Bernie Sanders would have been a lot more difficult to beat in a state like Minnesota than somebody like a Joe Biden. Unless Joe Biden completely concedes to the left, it's going to be a problem. Let's give some historical analysis, and then I will run the current voter analysis on the file, because again, if I just run it right now, you guys are going to be stunned. I really have to throw some historical perspective at you, voting behavior, so you can understand what happened here. All right. In 2000, Al Gore got 47.91% of the vote. That roughly is 1,168,266 votes. Then Governor George W. Bush, who won that election, received 45.5% of the vote, or 1,109,659 votes. The Green Party candidate, Ralph Nader, took 5.2%, 126,696. So yes, that is worth, and obviously worth considering. It was more than the 2% that Jill Stein was receiving in the polls in 2016, and especially in our own polling, which, as you guys know, I will lean on more than the public polling. We had this state, it was competitive. End of story. It was a competitive state, and it just wasn't getting attention. Jill Stein was not the factor that Ralph Nader was in 2000. Gary Johnson was about receiving about what Ralph Nader was receiving, and he's a libertarian. So the on the surface argument, which I'm not going to get into again, you should not immediately assume all Democrats will get all the green vote, just as you should not assume that all Republicans are going to get the libertarian vote. That's it's a trap. It could be true, but it's a trap. In 2004, without any third-party candidates on the ballot, Bush was still competitive, although the margin expanded a little bit. Kerry took 51 and a little bit in change, about 9/10 of a percentage point, to George W. Bush's 47.61. On the surface, you might want to say you may be tempted to say, well, that's because there wasn't a third-party candidate. Or it could be because George Bush was no longer the populist candidate that he was in 2000. He ran a very nationalistic populist campaign. 9/11 changed him. Minnesota is very anti-war as well. Only Barack Obama blew out his Republican rivals, and he did. John McCain in 2008, he got crushed by almost 12 points. 54 to 44, but if you look at the tens of percentage points, it's more like 11 and change. In 2012, Obama carried the state with a slightly smaller margin. Mitt Romney only barely cut into it. He got 52.65% of the vote, down from 54.06. And Mitt Romney was only able to bump up McCain by about a point, 44.96. So why in 2016 did we feel that this was a competitive state? Aside from the polling, it's populism, plain and simple, coupled with Donald Trump's overwhelming enthusiasm, and then there were third parties on there, but Donald Trump's enthusiasm gap was huge, and Minnesota, by the way, has a very high turnout, so they are typically the most, if not one of, the highest voter turnout states in the country. New Hampshire, we spoke about yesterday. I wanted to mention this, and I didn't. It was important. Since the 1950s on, up until the last presidential election, New Hampshire's voter turnout has been higher than the nation as a whole. Minnesota is not only higher than the nation as a whole, it's typically the highest. All right. But in Minnesota, populism has been a predominant, if not the dominant, political force in state politics. The success of the state's political parties depend on it. And the presidential voting preference shows this trend going back to 1860. Of course, we're dealing now with a popular vote, but that's how deeply ingrained it is in the state. So whether a Republican wants to admit it or not, the establishment GOP typically doesn't. That took root in the GOP, in the Republican Party. Populism, especially Midwest populism, was born in the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party. And for years, they had those undertones that remained. We're only seeing it resurge under Donald Trump. Bush in 2000 was a completely different candidate and man than Bush in 2004. Bush 2000 had a very populist undertone, both economically and in foreign policy. He was running around telling people we cannot be the police force of the world, right? So that was at the heart of Mr. Trump's economic message. It was an anti-establishment message, and it also had again, I can't overstate enough. It's also the enthusiasm gap that Trump had with Mrs. Clinton, and he will have again with Joe Biden. They were very excited in Minnesota. It was not uncommon at all for the extremely enthusiastic gap to be 30 points. It were big margins. Anyway, we were arguing that this could result in a big upset. Nobody saw it coming. So I think there may have been one or two polls that would basically show. I wanted to get this chart uploaded because the Minnesota in 2000 that George W. Bush ran on would be a Trump state. It has changed dramatically. The share of non-white voters has gone up pretty significantly. And we polled this from September 21st to September 23rd. And I had no idea, just to make this clear, I had no idea Larry Schweikert was going to give this poll to Steve Bannon. So just before anybody says anything, like I gave it to them to give to the Trump campaign, I just gave it to Larry. He gave it to Steve Bannon. I think at the time, I didn't even know he knew Steve Bannon. So they get this poll. It was a 2-point edge for Mrs. Clinton. Very, very close. Yeah, she wound up winning by about that same margin that we had polled it in September, but just with higher vote shares. So she didn't get 44% and Donald Trump did not get 42%. And so they eventually split. Here's why I'm bringing up this Access Hollywood tape. The impact, because of how early you can vote in Minnesota. The impact of the Access Hollywood tape was significant. And we were polling people at that time and asking them in the Midwest and, that in the areas where you could early vote, we were actually asking people whether or not they'd want their vote returned back. And they were big margins, significant margins. The early vote saved Mrs. Clinton. On election day, outside of the Twin Cities, Donald Trump clobbered her in the final remaining undecided vote. That wasn't true everywhere, depending on what state you're looking at. But in Minnesota, if they voted on election day, I think it was for every 4 voters that went in, it was like a 3-1. He was killing her outside of the Twin Cities. Why is this important? In the poll, even going back to September that we did, this is how he's going to have to win the state. I'm going to pull up the map soon and run the voter analysis in a second here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. In 2016, Trump had, in our poll, he had about 46% of the vote in the eastern Twin Cities suburbs. He really needed to be a little bit higher. On election day, according to the exit polls, he got about 47%, which doesn't surprise me. And that's why he lost by about 2 points. The recent polling in this state from the Salt Lakes, was it the, I think it was the Star or something like that. I don't want to give you guys a name of something, but the most recent poll in Minnesota shows Trump's approval rating is sitting pretty in this area in the 50s. So if you're in the low to mid 50s, really, he just needed to squeeze out a few more points out of those burbs, and it would have been a different race because, of course, that would have had an impact if he was appealing to those people a little bit more. We would have saw a little bit better in the Twin Cities. She clobbered him there, 65-25 because of the third parties, or 64-28, just to be, exact. Let's run this because you're going to be stunned. This is, let's do everybody, landline, email, mobile. Okay. Everybody's going to be thrown. I'm going to throw this all. We're going to cast a very big net. And what you're going to find interesting again is that this modeling is inferred in Minnesota. And just so, Tim, I wanted to show people how we do this because people ask me when we show this. It's not just the voter files. From your behavior, where you donate to, what you buy, your habits. It is a lot more that goes into it. So if we know you're donating to the NRA and some pro-life group, we know you're a conservative. Okay. And that a lot has to do with location and vote preference. So we know where the region of the state the voter's in. We know how that region breaks down. We know whether or not you're likely to be a Republican or Democratic voter. In 2016, the break by party was only about, I want to say D plus. Okay, actually, I was going to say D plus 3. It was D plus 2. Republicans were 35%, according to the exit polls. Democrats were 37%, and independents were 28%. Trump just won independents by 2 points, and that wasn't enough. And that's why he fell a little bit shy in the Twin Cities, the eastern Twin Cities suburbs. All right. I'm going to run this. I know I told you that because now I'm going to run this, and you're going to see what I just wanted to let you know so you don't think this is incredible or unbelievable because it's close. It's really close. Inferred Republican is inferred Republican is actually a lot higher than the inferred Democrat. Now, of course, there are more Democrats in Minnesota, and it's coming from this independent. So when you take out, if you were to call them on the phone and ask, what are you? There's going to be a lot in this group that are liberal. This has changed quite a bit over the years, by the way. It used to only be a +2. And then when you ran a likely voter with the voter propensity score, you get about Democrat +3 to +6. So, and then they very tight with the independents here. The independents in Minnesota typically are going to be slightly more Democrat than the independents nationwide. All right. So Trump only won them by 2 points in 2016. He could win national independence by 7, whatever it may be. And it's going to lag, or has traditionally, in Minnesota. The electorate turned out to be D plus 2 because they come from here. None of this is where I'm going with this. A little bit more than the nation as a whole, a little bit more female, but I'm going down to ethnicity because It's almost 70%. Years ago, Minnesota was a lot, closer to 80. All right. And the African-American vote is concentrated. Let's map this puppy out so I can show you where I'm going with this. Because Minnesota is, if Trump can keep the margins in the rural area, and in fact, in 2018, Republicans did very well in the Trump areas. Where he needs to win is where he fell about 3 points shy in 2016. That's how he's got to do this in order to carry this state. It's really, Tim, I'll probably know within, again, I mean, it depends how quick they report it, but I'll probably know whether or not Trump's going to win Minnesota pretty early, because it won't be hard to know where the vote has to come from. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, all right, let's just take a look before we get on the other side of the break, because they're coming up on the break very quickly. I'll get into the regions and I'll show you specifically. But for right now, let's just get this out of the way so you guys can see where everybody lies. So that putting on that independent kind of smeared that a little bit, but I really want to keep that on there for a reason. All right. Trump did very well in rural areas. No shocker there. Okay. I don't want to cut any of this map out. I really want to keep this. He did much better than Republicans typically do in even Republican friendly areas. DeKalb, all the way in the northeastern part of the state. He did very well up there. This area down here is one of the districts that carves out one of the districts that Republicans won in 2018. Again, I'm going to repeat this so you guys can understand the significance of this. Republicans lost 40 plus states in the House of Representatives in 2018. 66% of the 3 seats that they flipped came from this state. All right. It is becoming a larger divide, but if he holds those margins in in traditional Republican areas, then he can carry the state as long as he does a little bit better with those Republicans in the Southeast, in the Twin City burbs. Tim, what was you might remember, but Frontline had an article with the thread I did, and I think they got a little twisted up about where I was specifically talking about, but I want to say that poll had Trump at 52 or 54. Do you remember? It was close. It was 52 or 54. I'm not looking. Tim may not even. Oh, you are there. Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm here. I think you've got the Alabama map up on the screen, though.
Oh, my God. I hit the wrong map. 54, 50. I do have it up. Sorry about that, guys. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this puppy. My bad. Totally my bad. I'm trying to remember, and I could pull the Frontline article. I was looking at that thing, and I'm stunned. That's why I said, do I have the voter propensity score on? There was just way too many. It's supposed to be even, about even. And independents are heavier. It should be about almost dead even. Yeah, see, there we go. It's a little bit more. But again, that comes from the independents. It's about R+5 in this, but it's really not. If you do the voter propensity score, it gets about 37. I don't want to get back in and take the database to go, but I was looking at that before, Tim, like that's a lot of Republicans. But it's when I put that vote propensity score at about 50%, Republicans fall to 37, Democrats increase to 37. The reason why, if we were to call these people on the phone, this 26.5%, if we call them on the phone or poll them online, they have keeping that independent name. And they like the idea, that they're, basically in the middle of the road. In Minnesota, the middle of the road is to the left of the national electorate. All right. And that's why it has to be a candidate like Donald Trump, because the opportunity there comes from populism. Right. It's economic populism. All right. Yes. Now I'm looking at that. I'm so glad you said that.
The same thing that you would see in Wisconsin, which is, of course, a neighboring state.
Right. So did Paul Ryan do any? There we are. Did Paul Ryan do? And I'm looking at DeKalb over there, by the way, and I'm like, this is supposed to be St. Louis. But anyway, but Paul Ryan did nothing for Mitt Romney in Wisconsin, right?
Right.
Racine is basically home for Paul Ryan, but that didn't really turn into a bigger margin. It really, it doesn't. It's that I think people don't understand that Wisconsin is the birthplace of progressivism.
Right.
And the populism that came from that, which started, by the way, in the Republican Party. Things have changed now. But okay, here we go. So this area, where's Olmsted? I got to zoom in because that's what I was trying to show before, but I couldn't see it. Olmsted is one of those areas, Tim. Yeah, there we go. Olmsted is one of those areas. Here we go. This is where that tight congressional district was over here in 2018. I forgot his name. He's going to have to forgive me, but he took this by about 2 points. It was a Democratic held district. And then there was another one up more in the central northern part of the state that moved against the national mood. Okay. Hennepin state legislatures, seats for Republicans. They lost this one over here. So there was some pushback. This is the challenge Donald Trump is going to have here, Tim. Those independent votes, he can't win them by 2% or have
but he's going to get extremely high percentages in the northeast part of the state, up around Duluth. That was historically very, very Democratic.
Yeah, if he can hold that, let me scoot up there so people can see what you're talking about. If he can hold that, and that's what
I think there's probably a congressional seat up there that's going to be an easy flip for the Republicans.
I was looking for St. Louis when the other map was up before, and I saw DeKalb, and I'm like, wait, what is going on? This is what I was looking for over here. These are traditional Democratic areas, and you can see the blue throughout there. He did very well up there. And Republicans always do well in some of the, this area in Pennington. They always do that. Oh, well, Trump also, by the way, on Beltrami, he did better than any Republican candidate modern memory. But when it's 11:31, when I come back, I really want to get into the burbs over here because you can see that tealish, greenish, blob. And that's it. And if the Tribune poll is right, Tim, if he's at 54% with those voters, 52%, then Biden's in a lot of trouble in this state. He's in a lot of trouble. This actually was one of the states, too, where Amy Klobuchar getting out of the way. Bernie Sanders was expected to win this. If you go and look at the exit polls on election night, they always shift. If you go and look at the exit polls on election night, Tim, there was a large chunk, 4 in 10 on election night, told in the voter analysis exit polls, they've replaced exit polls. They told interviewers that they would not vote for Joe Biden. And that's why I had said from the jump that this area of the state, I think Bernie Sanders would beat Donald Trump in this state. I do. I just think Donald Trump was competitive against Hillary, and he'll be competitive against any establishment Democrat because it's that populism. I can't stress it enough. And if you were to throw somebody like a Bernie Sanders in the mix, then he's going to get those votes that you would traditionally think would go to Donald Trump, that crossover. Right. And in fact, when we would ask people, they would say, well, I'm an independent. And you'd ask them, okay, which ideology do you most closely align with? The Trump vote that was a Bernie vote in 2016, they would tell you they're moderately liberal. It's not a large percentage, but if you add up all of these marginal gains in these different groups, it adds up to a win. You know what I mean? And that's how elections are won. He lost the state by 2 lousy points. Right. And it was those burbs. And I remember I didn't know what some of these other people. I saw the exit polls on election day, the very first wave that came in at 3:00, and it looked bad. And I remember Minnesota was the first one I looked at, and it made me a little nervous. It was the first full round picture that I got to see outside of nationals. Because they do vote a little. They have a lot of early vote, so. If there was a mistake there, Tim, it would have been in how we were polling those early voters. And that's why I was thinking, well, looks like I was just wrong,
Right.
but it wasn't. And then election day, the vote was overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. It was. All right, let's get into this break here. And then, yeah, I'll come back and answer your questions when I come back. Absolutely right. Klobuchar is very popular in in Minnesota. Very popular. And that is part of what helped Joe Biden do his thing. All right. It is 11:34, almost 11:35. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. Follow me at Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. And I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow Tim at TJ Anderson1 on Twitter. And when we come back, I will wrap up Minnesota and answer your questions and show you exactly where that Trump would need to do a little bit better to win the state. All right. So if you guys are watching on Facebook, go ahead and like the page so you can get notified when we go live on Periscope. Give us those hearts and follow the account that you're watching it stream on. YouTube subscribers, keep this trend going. Like subscribe to the page, give us a thumbs up, like the video, and share it with your friends and family to get them to subscribe to it too. That will also notify you when we go live. But of course, the ultimate way to support the show is to go to, which is how we bring you these great little graphics, is to subscribe to PPD by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. All right, let's do the quick market update with Tim. See, this will be the last one today, Tim. So, let's
we're definitely lower than we were a little over half an hour ago. The Dow's down just over 2.5%. That's 600 points. The S&P 500 is down close to 3%, and the NASDAQ is down 3.5%. I just think that the momentum in the market has changed a little bit over the last couple of days, highlighted by the fact, I think the sharp decline in oil has really highlighted how weak the economy is and how much work needs to be done to turn that tide. It's not just going to be a simple factor of flipping a switch and getting a few people back to work. You're going to have to just have a very sharp uptick in industrial activity and economic activity and just normal life for people starting to drive places that they would normally drive, go to events that they would normally go to, and fly on their favorite airlines again. And that's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Let's pull the map back up, and we got about 23 minutes. I'll answer your questions. I'm going to get in this. I can see some great questions, but Dakota and Washington is where I was trying to zoom in before, but I was not going to hit that break before. I mean, I can't leave those two counties for a minute. That's what I really want to get to before we run out of time, because Hennepin County, where Democrats run up the vote, and where Republicans lost some state seats that they carve into Hennepin, the one specifically, she had represented that area for a while, and she may run again. I was talking to her recently. She may run again. We'll see. But basically, that area, those independents, is where we were talking about with that polling and why it matters. Let me pull it up. Can they see that good, Tim? What do you think? A little bit more? Zoom in a little bit more?
So if you can zoom in once more, that's better.
That's better? Okay.
Yeah.
Here's Washington. Here's Dakota. Trump did pretty well there. The reason why I brought up, by the way, Olmsted, which is down here before, is because Trump barely lost it. And then that district he barely lost it. That district was one of those target districts that Trump had carried. It doesn't include the whole county, and it has large chunks of what you see the blue there. But it was one of those areas. Trump had that district, but the county overall barely went to Hillary Clinton. I think this time, if it's a decent election for Trump, all things considered equal, if it's like a landslide loss for him, then this doesn't apply. But I'm talking about in what you would consider a decent election or a competitive election. Given the trends, Olmstead should go to Trump this time because it's continuing that trend. And by the way, it continued it in a D plus 13 national mood. All right. So Trump would, I think he was down like 0.2 of a percentage point, Tim. It was so close. And then it continued that trend to Republicans. That district that included did flip, even though it had resisted, even being more Republican on the presidential level. It had resisted over the course of 3 election cycles that he just kept eking it out over there, the Democrat. 0.1, 0.2. I mean, so close, recount territory. He just eked it out. Where Trump fell just a little shy is the southeastern suburbs over here. Okay. And they can see my little hand moving back and forth, right? They can see that. That's where he fell a little shy. I want to actually get these margins. So Clinton carried Washington 47% to 45.1. She carried Dakota, and my little clicker thing's not going to work. Let me bring it back up. You guys can't see the other thing that it'll just take long for me. It'll just take too long for me to load. So sometimes I look at other stuff that I'm not showing you. But he lost Dakota by a little under 5 points, which really turned out to be just over 10,000 votes. Donald Trump won roughly 47% if you average it out in those burbs. If the polling is true, Tim, and he's at more like 52, 54%, we're talking about a different ball game here. And there's a lot of votes here, folks. There's a lot of votes. I mean, overall with the state, Trump lost by about 44,000, something like that. It was a 1.5% loss. I mean, Dakota alone, the spread was 10,000 alone. And if he can beat that up and, maybe even fight that to a draw, carry Washington, which he nearly did, and carry Olmstead. And of course, he would have to keep all his margins in the rest of the state. I mean, that goes without saying, Tim, but the northeastern part of the state, throughout the central part of the state, the southwestern to the south central part of the state, he's got to carry that. Outside of these these counties right here that Hillary won, outside of that, she only won Olmstead down here in the southeast region. That's it. And it was very, very close. She got her buffer. Let me drag this a little bit. Wait for it to drag. She got her buffer from, come on, pull up. She got her buffer from St. Louis on. And it wasn't a thrashing, so she would typically, a Republican in Hennepin would get like thrashed. She only got 64% of the vote, just under 64%. That's where she ran up the margin. Trump did, about 28.5%. Depending on the trends now, that could fall more. So he would have to keep his other margins and buffer up the rest of the state. But again, if he's doing better in Washington and Dakota, then it's very unlikely that we're going to see such a loss in support. If he can keep it, Tim, in the high 20s in Hennepin, then the point is he's got a fighting chance. He's got to, and that's really where it's going to come down. Let me see if I can't pull this and drag this over here. I'm trying not to do it too quickly, but again, when election night rolls around, folks, all right, look at the Democrats' margin in Hennepin. Look to see if Donald Trump is like at 25%. Anything at like 25 or lower is going to be a large padding for the Democrats statewide. And if the Democrat is carrying Washington, all right, and Olmstead, again, very close. If they're carrying these, that's where Trump would need to do better. They can carry Dakota. He's just got to tighten it. Washington, Tim, if I was his campaign manager, I'd want to see Washington go red. It was so close. It was so close last time. It was so close. And that will tell us whether or not he really did have an increased. It's hard because approval doesn't go hand in hand. It doesn't go automatically, into vote share. But with Donald Trump, the phenomena is that there is a percentage of vote out there of people who do not approve. They will tell you they don't approve of him. It's his style. It's how he does things, but they still do vote for him. And if he, got 47% in that area last time and he can bring it up, then that it will be a shocker. And again, he went there one time, and he did what the Trump of 2016 did when we were talking about New Hampshire yesterday. I was bringing this up, go into the belly of the beast. Just I'm not going to stay out of the urban areas. I'm not going to stay out of the suburbs, around the metros and the exurbs surrounding these high populated areas. He'll have to do that again. That goes without saying. He'll have to. But he didn't even play for this state. He played for Michigan. Now, some of that overlaps. The truth is, whether you hear this from campaign surrogates or not, they essentially gave up on Wisconsin at the end, Tim. They gave up on it. They did not think Wisconsin was going to go for them.
No, they didn't. That's the one that they admitted that they missed. And
it was the first one to fall, by the way, in that area. And he hammered Michigan because he really thought that it was going to be tight there. Something was telling him. And so did Bannon, by the way. They really did believe that economic nationalism message would persevere over there. But they did neglect Minnesota. And look how close it was. 1.5 percentage points. 1.5. And from a campaign strategy perspective, logistically, it makes more sense if you're trying to hold on to what was the blue wall in the Midwest. It makes a lot more sense, folks, to swing through Minnesota and New Hampshire while you are shoring up the states that we know are going to be close. Michigan is going to be hard for him to hold on to. It's going to be. So if he wants to head off Biden, and we've all been through the Florida thing, of course he has to compete there. But I believe it'll be very difficult for any Democratic candidate to defeat Donald Trump in Florida. Cast the polls aside. We've been through the numbers. We've been through the historical data. We've been through the vote preference. We've been through the region. And we'll swing back and do it again. It's a big state. It deserves a lot of attention. But the bottom line is Donald Trump has to head off Joe Biden in the Midwest.
Right.
If Joe Biden sweeps back those blue wall states, it's over. It's over. Trump could even lose a state that has been trending, more competitive over the years. Like I'm thinking Arizona. Maybe he doesn't carry Maricopa, which we've been through Arizona too. I don't think Donald Trump is going to do as badly as McSally and Maricopa, but you never know. And you need some buffer. You need a buffer. This is the part of the country where Joe Biden can end the election early. He can make it an early night. There is no reason. I don't care what Brad Parscale says about approval ratings in New Mexico. I don't care about that. That is a unicorn, like the commenter said one time. That is a unicorn. Right now, the priority for the Trump campaign, if they want to win, the priority is to make sure Joe Biden does not run the table on you in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic. Because if he does, it's game over. You need something like a Minnesota, combination of Minnesota and New Hampshire, something within the realm of reality to offset maybe what may be peeling back of the blue wall. Let's say Biden wins back Michigan, Tim, right? And Trump is able to squeak and hold Wisconsin. He holds Pennsylvania. Maybe they make a big deal out of fracking in Pennsylvania. And Biden, just like we showed people before, he does horrible. And the Biden town does not come back for him, which we discussed when we went over Pennsylvania. That area does not come back. The Northwest Erie County, which Obama carried by 16 points, does not swing back away from Trump. And then Biden's, sole remaining grace is that southeastern part of the state, Philadelphia County, surrounding suburbs. Yep. And he's just not able to squeak out enough votes there because Hillary Clinton lost there by 40,000 votes. It's a lot of votes. In a state like Pennsylvania, it's a tight margin, but it's a lot of votes to try to find in other parts of the state, which was where that was Hillary's problem. Let's say Trump holds Pennsylvania. Let's say he holds Wisconsin. He holds Florida. He holds Arizona. Georgia is not competitive. I don't care what people say. On the presidential level, it is not a competitive race. He obviously holds Iowa, Ohio, and Biden picks off Michigan. Where is Donald Trump going to find the electoral votes if Biden picks off Michigan? Again, this goes back to what I've been saying now for years, but how I opened up this segment. Minnesota has been more Republican on the presidential level in modern elections than, since, let's say, really, Tim, since the last time a Republican carried Michigan, which is George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988. All right. It has been more Republican, and he didn't even play for it, and he barely lost it. He lost it by about the same number of votes than he won Pennsylvania by, and he hammered Pennsylvania. He hammered Michigan. He hammered Wisconsin into the final 2 weeks when he gave up on it. He beat these states with ads, even though he didn't spend that much money. He beat them with rally after rally after rally after rally after rally. He went to Minnesota once.
Right.
One time.
Right.
One time. Go talk to those people in Washington. Go talk to those people in Dakota. Hell, Tim, I'd even go up to the northeastern part of the state. Why? Because I want to tighten his margin. There are votes out there.
Right.
There are votes out there. She won, let's say Cook County. She won it. That's just for everybody else. Cook County is up over here. It's the last county in the northeastern region. It's right here. Very small county, big geographically, but small as far as vote share goes, but Democratic. She won it 56.9 to 34.4. Only a few thousand votes out there. Lake County, only a few thousand votes out there. He lost it by 140 something votes. That's it. St. Louis, obviously a big county. He won 40% of the vote, Tim. And it turned out to be like a 13,000 vote margin. Go to St. Louis. That will have a psychological effect on the rest of the region of the state.
Right.
Go to St. Louis. Go St. Louis.
I believe Trump went to
Washington.
I believe
St.
Trump
Louis,
went to
Washington.
I believe Trump went to Traverse City in the 2016 election.
In the 60,
in Michigan.
You know what? Yeah, I was just because there'll be some kind of like overlap.
My question on Michigan would be: do you think that Governor Whitmer's overreach on the stay-at-home policies or guidance produces a negative backlash against her that helps Trump amp up his turnout in
I think
in 16? And then as a corollary to that question, do you think that there is a anti Ilhan Omar vote in the in 90% of Minnesota outside of her little communal area in St. Paul that produces a backlash against the Democratic Party in 2020?
Yeah, let me give let's go with the second part first, because it deals with Michigan and Minnesota. Both Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib were able to win their respective primaries and then later their elections because they got out their vote, meaning their vote, their neighborhood vote. Rashida Tlaib, we've polled that. I can share that with people tomorrow if they want. We've polled that actual district because we polled the state and then peeled off the district. Rashida Tlaib was only at the approval of like 52% of Democrats strong. She's not popular.
And that's probably a D20 plus district.
It's D30, almost D30. Yeah, it's really, and she's not popular at all. And then you have Ilhan Omar, very much to say there could be. Which gets to the first part of the question. I really think that Minnesota wasn't as draconian as, they were more responsive. But Michigan really went more really out there. these Democratic governors have handed Donald Trump a gift in what would otherwise be a disadvantage for him.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if that was a comment before, but yeah, we switched the map. I can't, it's hard for me to see. Tim told me it was Alabama. It's hard for me to see. I can't see what you guys see versus what I see. It's a little, that's having one person do this, but Tim told me. Yeah, but in a bad economy, they kind of, that was his Achilles heel, is where I'm going. They threw everything in the kitchen sink at Donald Trump and none of it sticks. All right. This had the potential to do what all of the other things were not able to accomplish. And then, though, they just couldn't help themselves, Tim. And he has, in both of these states, if you look at his primary vote, he's an incumbent president running against nobody. And he had huge vote numbers for an incumbent president who, nobody was running against him. There is already a very strong contingency of fired up people who are going to vote for Donald Trump. It's his base. It's going to happen. And then throw that on top of people who are angry. It's not just, I don't care what the media says. In a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's not just going to be Republicans screaming about the economy. This idea that it's only Republicans on the beach, only Republicans in the streets protesting, only Republicans going to churches. Those churches were predominantly Black Baptist, Black Protestant churches that we saw in the news, Tim. Right. There were. It's just not true. There will be. So my point is, they handed him a gift, and his opportunity here. And he sees it. He's smart. Politically, I'm talking about his instincts.
Right.
He's a smart guy.
Yes.
That's what liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, those tweets. That was that. He sees it. He sees that opening and he went for it. And that is a gift they handed to him. And this will be a discussion moving forward into the election. The problem Democrats have made for themselves is they gave themselves no wiggle room, Tim. There is no way now, if this proves to have been a bad strategy, there is no way now for them to say Donald Trump was too draconian and he killed the economy.
Right.
They were the predominant voices arguing for the shutdown. And they were the ones who implemented these policies. It's not just economic liberty, it turned into civil liberty.
Right.
So they did this to themselves and they have nowhere to back out of. I don't understand, sometimes, and I do understand that. I really shouldn't say that because the predominant view among Democrats, Tim, is that demographics is destiny. And they feel that they can do a lot of this and it won't matter because they have the numbers. And that is a big part of the reason for their meltdown after 2016. They didn't think it was mathematically impossible for Donald Trump to win Michigan or the Electoral College for that matter. They didn't think it was mathematically possible.
Right.
They thought they had the numbers and that's it. That's all. It was no chance. And they really do, you believe what really you want to believe. We all, whether we admit it or not, like to affirm our own beliefs. And the new emerging Democratic majority has been the predominant conventional wisdom among the political left. And unfortunately for Republican voters, many Republicans believed it too, which is why you saw the postmortem after 2020, the autopsy. What did it say to do, Tim? It said to do the exact opposite of what Donald Trump did to win the election. Yep, confirmation bias. That's exactly right. Confirmation bias strikes again. And we have to, a little bit of a warning, we have to challenge our own views, So I constantly field questions from people like, how on earth could Biden even be a competitive candidate? The guy is mentally, obviously there's something wrong with him. Well, that's true, but you can't just think like you think. You have to try to think like other people think and put yourself in their shoes, try to get into their heads. Or the easiest way to do that, by the way, is simply by listening. Listen to what they say. I got to tell you, folks, when I was polling in 2016, the reason I defend, and a lot of detractors think I'm defending Trump during a lot of this, and I'm not. I view it more as I'm defending the people that I heard in my polling that were telling me things that we all share different experiences, and I would not have understood unless I was listening. And when it's racist. It's racist. In 2016, the issue of immigration was viewed by voters. Trump won and took away from Barack Obama. It was viewed as an economic issue. It was not viewed as an issue of race or anything like that. That's crazy. It was viewed as an economic issue. They were like, what about me? And Donald Trump was the only one giving them, here's about you. I won't forget you. And that's how he did it. And again, he brought that message to Minnesota, because we're coming up on the time. He brought that message to Minnesota all of one time, and he nearly flipped it, 1.5%. So if I was Team Trump, I would, get off the the New Mexico train and shore up the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic and try to add Minnesota and New Hampshire to your electoral vote margin in case Biden peels off one of those states, or one you're not even expecting, like Arizona. All right, folks, that wraps up another episode of Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You can follow me at Peoples_Pundit on Twitter. I'm joined by Tim Anderson. Follow him, folks, at TJ Anderson1 on Twitter. For if you do, or if you did, then you were not shocked by WTI yesterday. All right, you would have known there's something was screwy in WTI world. If you guys follow us on Periscope, thanks for all the hearts. If you haven't, give us one before you leave. Go ahead and make sure you follow the account where it's streaming. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, before you leave, don't forget to like the page, People's Pundit Daily. Share it with your friends, share it with your family. And same thing for you subscribers on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And we are going to hit that next milestone, folks. Again, the ultimate way, guys, to support the show is how we bring you all the bells and whistles and the nice maps and databases of 150 million voters. Subscribe to People's Pundit Daily by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. We will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to do something a little bit different tomorrow with the states. I'm going to go into a red state that Democrats think they can flip, which is Texas. And we're going to look at the giant state of Texas to see if it's truly possible during this election cycle, whether Joe Biden could take Texas from the state, from the president. And we'll get into that tomorrow. But all the best, people. We will see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Can't wait. Look forward to it.